Hey there, I'm Bailey and welcome to my channel where I share all the tips and tricks necessary for you to live a life of adventure. Okay, so I know for a lot of people, one of the hardest things about hiking is finding new places to go hike. So especially if you live someplace like the Midwest, or you just moved and you're a little overwhelmed or just getting started, it can be really hard to find new trails to hike other than the really popular ones that have a lot of traffic on them. So I'm going to share some of my tips that I learned when I moved to Bloomington, Illinois, which is like smack dab in the middle of the state. As an intern during college, I remember I was doing the 52 hike challenge at the time, and my goal was to hike a separate trail every week, so like a new trail every week and not repeating. And I was in Illinois for like 4 months. So it was really hard for me at first to be like, where the heck am I supposed to go hike? The other flip side of that was I was a poor college student doing a, unpaid internship. So I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on gas, driving hours and hours every weekend. And so from that experience, I picked up a lot of really good tips, and I've collected others over the years, like also when I lived in Garden City, Kansas, the same kind of thing where it's hard to find trails, but I used and picked up a lot of these tips to help me find other places to hike. So these all work too, even if you live in a place like Colorado or Washington or something where there's an abundance of trails about, you can use these to find some really cool, neat, hidden gems. But before I dive in, I do want to say if you are interested in seeing more tips and tricks for hiking and backpacking, especially if you have dogs, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos and content every week related to hiking and backpacking. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so the first way to find hiking trails is, get this, a Google search. I know, like super original, right? But honestly, this is one of the first things I do when I am looking for a trail, if I'm either traveling or like when I've moved, because I've moved a lot, is I punch in like trails near Garden City, Kansas, or trails near Chicago, Illinois, or whatever, where I'm going, right? Trails near Zion National Park, dog-friendly trails near Rocky Mountain National Park. You can use like some sort of combination. A lot of times, like tons of things will pop up, blogs, all trails, all these different websites. Maybe you won't get anything, like that doesn't work as well if you live somewhere without a ton of trails. You'll just usually find one or two results where they might be really far away. But this is the first thing I do if I'm trying to find a trail, especially if I'm, again, like traveling, I just moved, that kind of thing. It's kind of like gives you the most obvious ones, especially if you're looking for like the nice, well-known trails, right? So that's the first thing you should do. Just Google search it. All right, so the second idea I have is actually one that you will see pop up a lot on a Google search, usually near the top, and that is to use an app such as AllTrails, and specifically AllTrails. So if you've never used AllTrails before, it's a website that has lots of different hiking data. It has trails, it has maps. You can use the app, the AllTrails app, while you're hiking to show where you are on the map. The nice thing is there's comments, so people leave comments about trail conditions. It tells you like the driving directions. It tells you if it's dog friendly or not. It gives you like a difficulty rating, which, you have to kind of take some of that with a grain of salt, right? But it's nice because it's kind of like everything conglomerated into one. And there's a lot of really good trails on there. It's like super easy to use. And I really like this option if you are a beginner hiker or beginner backpacker, because there's usually like loops for backpacking, like good hiking trails. It's just a really great, easy to use resource. So I'd really highly suggest looking at AllTrails as one of your first options, especially if you're just getting started. Okay, so my third tip is to actually use Google Maps. So this is something that was suggested to me on like a Facebook group or something when I moved to Illinois, was they said to just pull up Google Maps, and then anytime you see a green space, zoom in, like really close zoom in, and sometimes there'll be a name. It'll say the name of whoever owns that piece of property, if it happens to be public property. And then from there, you can take that name and plug it back into Google and see if you find more information. And this, I think, is the most helpful in places where there's not a lot of national forest, because if you can find that like green spot, you know, it should stand out really well. Whereas like places where there's a lot of different public land and public property, this doesn't help quite as much, but it could help in that situation too if you're looking along a certain road corridor or something like that, just to help give your search some direction. So this is usually another course I take, especially if I'm having a really hard time, is I'll just zoom in on those Google Maps, and it really helps to show different types of property and gives you some names. And again, another like starting or jumping off point to further your search from there. Okay, so tip number 4 kind of goes along with that, and that is to look on the specific like land organizations that manage different types of public land. So specifically, I'm talking about groups like the Nature Conservancy, National Forest, Bureau of Land Management or BLM, wilderness groups, state parks, regional parks, national parks. There's more out there that I'm probably forgetting. But if you look for or like know the name of who manages the land around you, or you are looking at Google Maps and you see, oh, this is owned by the Nature Conservancy, you can go online and look on their website, and a lot of times they'll list hiking trails, areas that you can camp. They're also a really great resource because those are the people you want to talk to about trail conditions and closures. So if there's forest fires, that's the place to go find out if you are allowed to even hike there if it's open, or if there's a fire ban and those kinds of things. All that information can be found through those organizations. And the nice thing too is if you're having trouble using their website, because sometimes they do leave things to be desired. I mean, I love the National Forest websites to get started, but sometimes there's not a lot of information. You can either give them a call, or if their office is near where you're going or where you live, you can go on into their local office and talk to someone, and they'll go over the maps with you and give you their recommendations and that kind of thing, or at least tell you if any rangers have been out there recently and how the trails look, if they're bogged down with snow or if they're clear and that kind of thing. So that's a really great resource too, is to just check into those specific groups that manage the trails and the public property you're interested in hiking in. So tip number 5 is a really good one, especially if you're going to be somewhere with a lot of tourism. So I recently moved here to Homer, Alaska a couple months ago, and when I was searching for trails, what ended up being a really great resource was the local Homer Office of Tourism website. As well as for us, our recreation website also listed a lot of trails. So aside from like discussing like gym use and like places you could go play soccer and that kind of thing, they also listed local trails on that list and like rules for Kachemak Bay State Park and that kind of thing. But tourism websites are also good. Those are usually going to be the more popular trails where you're going to see more people. So keep that in mind, but it's at least a place to get started. And again, more resources, and they usually have directions and that kind of thing. And there's a reason why they recommend those trails, is because usually they're good for people that are either newer or they have a lot of reward with a lot less like investment of time and energy and resources. So, I mean, take that as you will, but there's usually lots of great trails that you can find that way. And same thing if you're visiting an area, if you have like a tourism office, if you go in, usually it's locals that work at those places. So if you say, you know, hey, I just moved here, or hey, I'm in town visiting and I'm looking for this kind of trail and I would love it to be dog friendly, then a lot of those times those people can give you their own personal recommendations. Which leads me into my next tip, which is heavy locals. So if you are new to an area, get to know other hikers in the area. Either join like hiking groups, get on local Facebook groups, go into the bookstore and buy like best hikes on the Kenai Peninsula, those kinds of things, because there's a lot of people around you that have their hidden spots that they either might not share out loud or maybe they will. But you won't find them in other places published because maybe they don't have like trailhead signs, maybe parking isn't as easy, but it's a nice trail, it's just that no one talks about it or knows about it yet. So getting to know the locals and talking to them either in person, online, or again, looking for those specific books targeted at the area where you're hiking are all a really good move for finding other trails. And the nice thing about the books and stuff too, is they'll be a little bit more in-depth usually about telling you about landmarks. They'll give you some sort of map, like mileage, those kinds of things, so you really know what to expect. And same if you talk to someone in person, they should be doing the same kind of thing. Okay, and so tip number 7 is to use paper maps. So some of you might not necessarily be comfortable with this, but personally, I just really love these National Geographic Trails Illustrated maps. Like, they just make my heart happy. I love to collect them. Every time I go to REI, I buy another map. But the nice thing is if you go on here, and I've done this a lot, just like look at your area you can see all the roads. You can see if it's public or private based on if it's like yellow or green. You can see like state parks and national parks. You can see the trails, whether it's like summer trails or if they're like ski trails and that kind of thing, if the trail's maintained or not. So this is a really great thing to do because you can say, oh, I live here in Homer, and I'm looking for trails in the area, like what are my options? Like where can I go? And this really is like the one that's going to lie to you the least, and give you a lot of really great hidden gems that you won't find other places. I will warn you, okay, so this has happened to me several times, especially this last summer, where I looked at these trail illustrated maps and found trails that I wanted to use for the San Luis Loop. So specifically coming to mind is the Lower Andelich Trail in Durango and the South Brush Trail in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where I'm like, oh great, there's this nice trail. It goes right where I need to go. Like, oh, sweet, I'm gonna take this trail. And I would get there after hiking for days or weeks. And like maybe there's a sign and you start hiking and eventually the trail just kind of like peters out and you're just like left in the wilderness, kind of like, why? And it's really annoying because especially when you're backpacking or through hiking, like you can't just turn around. Like if you go way out of your way, you're gonna run out of food or whatever. I mean, you can, like you should always be able to turn around. But when you're through hiking, it's just like, all right, like here we go off trail through the trees. And it just is obnoxious because a lot of these trails were well built, I think. And that's why they're marked on these maps, is that one time they were well built, well maintained trails, but they just haven't seen enough use over the years. And so now they have just turned into like use tracks. And I will say most of these maps tell you when they were published. So it should say like on here, the last publishing date. So you can kind of figure how up to date they are. I wanted to add into this too is the Gaia GPS app. So I put this separately from AllTrails because to me, using Gaia is much more like using a digital map than it is like using an app like AllTrails that's all encompassing. Because to me, Gaia is less user-friendly. And if you have the premium version, you can actually download all of the Trails Illustrated maps. You can download overlays for like fires and snowpack. It'll tell you public land and private land. There's other like map overlays you can use, but it requires much more knowledge as far as how to read a topo map, how to navigate, that kind of thing. But it's nice because you can also like make routes on there. You can guesstimate distances just like you can on a paper map. So it has a lot of similarities to paper maps. It just takes a little bit more knowledge on how to use it. But I really like it. That's what I use to make my San Luis Loop route over the summers. I mapped it all on the Gaia GPS and I use that to navigate a lot, along with paper maps. And keep in mind, if you use paper maps too, be sure to bring a compass with you. You can sometimes use maps like these national parks maps, but I prefer like real topo maps for finding trails. Just depends on where you live and that kind of thing. So that's my last tip. I would love to hear, how do you find trails? So question of the day is, how do you find your new trails to hike? Do you use AllTrails? Do you just Google search? Do you use paper maps? Do you use something else that I didn't mention? I'm always looking for new ways to find trails. I'm sure everyone else is too. So be sure to share in the comments. If you found this video to be helpful, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. That just lets me know that I should keep making more videos like this and that this was helpful to everyone. So other than that, I hope you guys all have a great week and I will see you at the next video. And until then, happy trails.